You're listening to another episode of the Coaster101 podcast. I'm Andrew Stillwell, and right now it's the second week of November. It's starting to get cold. I've got the first kind of chill in the Charlotte area, which is nice. It's nice to be wearing pullovers, and it's going to get cold eventually, we hope. But in the meantime, I thought the second week of November, there was no better opportunity to talk about one of people's favorite fall activities, going to water parks. Not actually, but we're joined on the podcast this week by Aaron Martinez. And Aaron, you are the director of marketing for Schlitterbahn Water Parks, both in Galveston and New Braunfels, correct?
That's right, yes. So I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate your willingness to come on the podcast and talk the goings on at Schlitterbahn, Galveston, and New Braunfels. You know, I was a kid growing up. I was one of those kids who would watch the Travel Channel, all the roller coaster shows and shows like Extreme Water Parks, which they apparently still air on Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. But almost every time you turned on a water park show on the Travel Channel, you heard from this mythical place called Schlitterbahn in New Braunfels, Texas, which, again, as a kid growing up in Florida and North Carolina, I have no concept of Texas geography. But my first question for you, and then we'll get into kind of the history, what does Schlitterbahn mean?
Well, Andrew, I am glad you asked. So you're right. Schlitterbahn is in the heart of Texas in actually a German town called New Braunfels. And Schlitterbahn actually means slippery road in German. So that's kind of where the name come from, deep in the German heritage. And here we are today, and hopefully making Schlitterbahn a made-up word, basically, for the water park, making it well-known worldwide.
Absolutely. That's our goal with this podcast anyway. And so right now, the Schlitterbahn, the brand, they got their start in 1979, opened the Schlitterbahn Water Park Resort in New Braunfels. And since then, you guys have expanded to another park in Galveston as well.
That's right. So we opened the Galveston Park in 2006. Last year was our 15-year anniversary for the Galveston Park. And we are chugging along. We are doing great. We celebrated 40 years of the New Braunfels Park just a few years ago, and man, things have changed so much in 40 years.
Let's go a little bit into the history. I mean, do you know the backstory? I know it was a family-owned park up until very recently, but what's the history behind Schlitterbahn and the New Braunfels location specifically, and how it became kind of the water park mecca of the United States?
Yeah, absolutely. I love to talk about this because it's such a good old, traditional American hardworking family story. So in 1979, the Henrys bought a resort. And from then they decided, hey, we need to have some activities on the resort property in order to attract visitors. So they built a water slide, homemade water slide. And from that, they kept on expanding. And eventually the water park portion of Schlitterbahn became more popular than the resort park. And so, man, from there, it just continued to grow and expand. It's along the banks of the Comal River. So what's really unique about Schlitterbahn New Braunfels is we use some of that spring-fed water in a lot of our attractions. So you get a nice little chill in there when you jump in. But in the hot Texas summer, I know it's November right now, but man, we are thinking happy thoughts. We cannot wait for summer to come back. Well, maybe after Christmas, and then we can think our summertime thoughts. But yeah, so this family just grew this resort into a world-renowned water park. And in that, there were some huge industry inventions that came from Schlitterbahn. So we have our Boogie Bahn, which is our inland surf ride, which now you can be seen worldwide on cruise ships and water parks all around the world. Our uphill water coaster, Dragon's Revenge, was the first uphill water coaster in the world. And now they're all over, including a record-breaking water coaster, Massive in Galveston. So, and then in 2019, we were acquired by Cedar Fair Entertainment Company, and Cedar Fair has done a phenomenal job of investing into what makes Schlitterbahn special, keeping the tradition alive, but bringing it up to Cedar Fair standards. And we all know that Cedar Fair has very high standards for a lot of areas. So we're thrilled to be a part of the Cedar Fair family now.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was going to ask, when Cedar Fair acquired you guys. Obviously, it's been an interesting time since you guys were purchased in 2019. Obviously, 2020 being what it was, and all this other stuff. But what has, in those past 2-ish years, what has Cedar Fair kind of injected into the two properties?
Yeah, so I think Cedar Fair has injected a level of excellence and kind of just a corporate backing. It's so nice to be a part of a family of parks that are world renowned in their own rights, and just to have kind of that support. Cedar Fair has invested millions of dollars into each of these parks, both Schlitterbahn Galveston and Schlitterbahn New Braunfels, over the past few years. But you're right, Andrew, man. We have not had a normal Cedar Fair year. So Cedar Fair acquired Schlitterbahn officially, I believe, in July of 2019. And then, man, we were hitting the ground running, just fully on board with this transition. And then the pandemic started. So that obviously changed a lot of things quite rapidly. And then 2001 came, and we opened and operated as normally as possible. But there were still some restrictions in place, and of course we dealt with the labor shortage and some other things post pandemic that I don't think we were truly expecting. Not that any of us were expecting a worldwide pandemic anyway, but
right.
So we're hoping that 2022 will bring us as back to normal as possible, and we will truly operate under Cedar Fair leadership with what Texans and people worldwide have grown to love about these parks.
That's awesome. Well, let's talk some attractions here. And again, yeah. I was looking a little bit at the Schlitterbahn websites. The park in New Braunfels has more than 50 rides, slides, rivers, chutes. What are some of the highlights at the New Braunfels Park? And then we'll kind of touch on Galveston as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So the New Braunfels Park, I mentioned earlier that, a lot of the attractions are filled with spring-fed water. So the New Braunfels Park, basically, it's split up into two different sections. So we have the original section, which is a lot of those, kind of homemade spring-fed water attractions, a lot of tube chutes in that area. So you get to be in giant black tubes and tube rivers and, kind of homemade tube chutes, and it's a blast to be in. There are some themed attractions. And man, that is, I hope I don't age myself a ton here, Andrew, but that is what people my age remember going to as a kid, and now they're taking their kids to the same place where they have so many memories. One of my favorite sayings is summer isn't summer without a Schlitterbahn trip to many Texans. And it's true. And that was true, 20, 30, 40 years ago. So it's really cool. And then on the new side or on the more recent side of Schlitterbahn, New Braunfels is Blastenhof. And we have the world's longest water attraction, which is the falls. It's about a 40-minute loop of kind of a whitewater river type fill. We have the Master Blaster, which is an uphill water coaster, Dragon's Revenge, which I already touched on. Every single section has plenty of kids areas. There's thrill attractions. It's really something to do for the full family. So, man, it's definitely a spot where Texans and non-Texans alike, we have plenty of people that make the trek from Louisiana or New Mexico or Colorado just to come and hang out at Schlitterbahn for a few days. So
that's awesome. And I want to the name Blastenhof is such a great pun, German sounding pun, and obviously it kind of play on blasting off. Are there any other crazy weird puns going on at Schlitterbahn? Or
so some of our so we have Blastenhof is one of our sections. Tubenbach is another section, completely made up word. Surfenberg, another one.
Got it.
In Galveston, we have a Wasserfest section, so which means water party. Again, it's not an actual word, but to us it is, and we have made it that. So, and we try to inject German into as much of what we do. Sometimes on social, when I'm talking to people, I talk to people as our Schlitter friends, which is, friends of Schlitterbahn, another term that we made up. And it's really fun because in New Braunfels specifically, there's a lot of that German influence in restaurants and just throughout. And so it's really fun to be a part of the community in that way.
Mm-hmm. And I know, Cedar Fair is obviously known for their food, and this culinary renaissance that's kind of ongoing in the greater industry. I mean, do you have like German restaurants? Can I get like sausage and a pretzel at either the Schlitterbahn parks?
Yeah, absolutely. So Schlitterbahn New Braunfels has a lot more of that German
Mm-hmm.
fare. And I think one of my colleagues last time we were on the podcast said that people come for the rides, but they stay for the food. And I'm kind of jumping ahead here, but when we're talking about the investments that Cedar Fair is making, man,
Mm-hmm.
food is a huge priority at both of these parks. So, I think that's one area that Schlitterbahn has seen. Hey, we have plenty of opportunity here, and so with the investment that Cedar Fair is making, let's up our game and let's bring people here for the food. But we also have a ton of great food that is just very Texas inspired. The thing that comes to mind right now is our brisket-stuffed turkey leg. So it's a traditional turkey leg, but with like Texas slow smoked brisket. They slow smoke it for 14 hours, starting the night before, obviously, and cut open the turkey leg, stuff it with brisket, cheese and sour cream and all that deliciousness. Not promising that it's the most healthy thing to eat, but park food isn't supposed to be healthy.
That's right. Yeah. We'll talk. You're going to send me one of those after the podcast. We'll put it on dry ice. We'll be good to go. But
Oh, you got it, man.
Love it. See, November, we're talking turkey. I told you it was seasonal.
Look at that, man. I didn't even realize how good I am at connecting the dots, but here we go, man. Let's do it.
The synergy is amazing.
Yes.
But, let's look ahead a little bit to 2022. Obviously, you're looking forward to that first Cedar Fair year, but, what are some things going on in the off season? I know the traditional park season is April or May till September, that Memorial Day till Labor Day window. But what are some things you're excited about for next year?
Yeah. So, one of the questions that I get asked a ton is, man, what do you guys do during the off season? Like, do you guys even do anything during the off season? And, if our entire job was passing out inner tubes to people, then yeah, probably not. But man, there is so much planning, and investment and work that goes into the off season. And really, at Schlitterbahn New Braunfels, we're investing $9 million into the park this year. So it's a huge investment. And, at Schlitterbahn Galveston, almost $3 million is being invested in that park. And I think it really boils down to like three different areas that we are going to invest in. Infrastructure and aesthetics. So enhancing what we already have, painting rides, getting new motors for rides, new wave makers, enhancing the landscaping and the restrooms, those kind of things. The second area is guest experience. So we are expanding the front gates at both parks. Adding, just making sure that people do not have to wait in line to get into the park. So, the front gate expansion, new food locations. So we're having a brand new $2 million catering kitchen coming in at Schlitterbahn New Braunfels, a brand new food location, a little taco truck coming in to Schlitterbahn Galveston, as well as just enhancements, blowing out some of the existing bars and making it both swim up and walk up bars. So really cool. And that's happening at both parks. We're hiring a brand new chef at Schlitterbahn Galveston to be in charge of kind of all the cuisine and all the fun stuff. We've already hired one at New Braunfels. And then lastly, an area of focus is our associate experience. We want our associates to enjoy work, man. You cannot find a more fun job than working at Schlitterbahn. And so we are remodeling our training rooms. We're hiring a training manager that's simply in charge of training our associates to be the best that they can be for our guests. And so it's a lot of money, but, investing into our guests, into our associates, and what makes Schlitterbahn special, basically. And then there are going to be some resort upgrades at Schlitterbahn New Braunfels that'll take place kind of, later on in 2022. But there's so much money and there's still so much coming down the pipeline, Andrew. I cannot wait to eventually talk to you about some of the fun projects coming in 23 and 24, because I think it'll take a few different podcasts to talk about those, man.
I love it. So coming down the pipeline, that's not a wink, wink, nudge, nudge hint, is it? I'm kidding,
Andrew.
That is another conversation for another day. As a podcast host, I'm required by law, international podcast law, to answer those questions, only to receive the answer that there's more information coming. We're bound by marketing plans and NDAs and all this other fun stuff. I get it. I have to ask, and I tried to trip you up there, and you're a pro. You caught it.
And all I did was smile. I mean, I know your listeners cannot see it, but man, it was the biggest smile, and that's all we can say about that. Next topic, Andrew.
I love it. I love it. Let's move on. I want to talk a little bit about you guys on social media. You mentioned your Schlitterbahn family on Twitter, but a medium that you guys have been killing it on all season has been TikTok.
Yeah.
And I want to talk more about kind of what goes into the Schlitterbahn TikTok, because you guys just kind of take the trends. And I think, honestly, that was the catalyst for this whole podcast interview. Was I saw your TikTok that's like you feet up on your desk in your Crocs and saying, what do we do in the off season? And I said, yeah, come on the podcast and talk about it. But, where do you guys get your inspiration for your TikToks? And how big is your marketing and social team where you guys are constantly just pinging ideas off one another and kind of going water park viral on theme park TikTok, which it's a crazy subset of itself, but
it is. Man, TikTok has been so much fun. So we launched our TikTok, I think during the pandemic. And it was really just, hey, let's reserve the name, and then really this season is when we started. Okay, let's storyboard. Let's plan for these TikToks, and some of them are storyboarded and take hours and hours of filming and editing, and some like the one you just mentioned, where my Crocs, up on my desk. That was took 5 minutes out of my day, and TikTok is so weird with their algorithms and what goes viral and what doesn't. But it's really fun to be a part of. During the season, I have about 2 interns that I work with that we help bounce ideas off of. And, if you scroll through our TikTok channel, you'll see their faces. It's part of the requirement is they have to be in front of the camera. But now during the off season, I'm a team of myself. So you'll see a lot of selfie shot TikToks, but man, it's really fun. It's a really fun part of the job to figure out how to be relevant with the latest trends and, how to tie that into a theme park or water park. And man, honestly, I have the most fun watching some of my colleagues from Cedar Point or Kings Island. Valley Fair kills it. Dorney, a lot of these folks are just doing a phenomenal job on their TikTok channels. And it's hard not to steal all their ideas all the time.
Yeah, it's a medium. We've got one TikTok posted on Coaster101, and it was at over Universal Hollywood, and it just so happened that the guy who runs our site, John, one of his friends from college, works at TikTok, and I think she produced that for us. And so we're learning, we're trying to adapt. It took us 15 years as being a website to create a podcast, so we're not right on top of the trends, but it's coming, I promise. And, like you mentioned, I see, Kelsey at Valley Fair or, Tana at Dorney or Kings Island, those guys up there. I mean, the different the different ways they tell their stories on TikTok is hilarious. And I mean, I can speak to Valley Fair specifically with intern Kevin. Their guy Kevin, they just kind of make fun of Kevin sometimes, and he was just he became a TikTok celebrity. So,
man, Kevin has been I don't know the full history of every single hire at Valley Fair, but Kevin has to be top notch hire ever at Valley Fair.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is a Schlitterbahn podcast, but Kelsey, if you're listening, good job. I mean, it's fantastic. Let's talk some of your Schlitterbahn favorites, and we can divide this up. I know you're based down in Galveston, so right. I will divide this up. I'm not going to make you pick and choose between the two parks.
Woo, good, thanks.
But let's start with Galveston. If you're entering Schlitterbahn for the day as a guest, and I know you get to do this, anytime you want, you can kind of go out into the park, do your thing when you're working. You get to ride one attraction. What are you picking and why?
Okay, so it's kind of a two-part question. If I'm by
Yes.
myself, I'm walking straight to the back of the park into Schlitterbahn Galveston's Blastenhof section and riding Massive Monster Blaster, which is our record-breaking water coaster. Used to be the tallest water coaster in the world until this past year. Somebody beat it by, I think, like a foot. But it is the most fun water ride I've ever been on across both parks, or across any park. It is such a blast. It's about a 90-second to 2-minute ride, and it, like, I find this is embarrassing to admit, but like I find myself giggling the whole time, as I'm riding it, just because like you're having so much fun that you can't help but just let it out, man.
Okay. And then I love your play there. It's a blast. I see what
It
you
is.
did there.
Man, I'm so good at these puns, and you're so good at picking them up that I don't even realize what I'm saying.
That's that's the beauty of a podcast, is when you pick up on somebody else's visual cues that they probably didn't even mean to do, but it works. And now we're talking about it, and the audience is, rolling their eyes and saying that. But you know what? We're good with it. They know what they got into at the sake of this podcast. But what about at New Braunfels? What's your pick there?
So at New Braunfels, I going to go a completely different route here, and I think the falls is my favorite attraction there. It's kind of, like I said, a whitewater attraction. So it's a lazy river and kind of a rapids river attraction, but it lasts for 40 minutes. So you're sitting in a tube and you're relaxing and just kind of enjoying it. And then all of a sudden you get into some rocks and some rapids and you go around and, you're kind of spinning and having a great time. But it all depends if my children are with me or not. So, man, in Galveston, my kid's favorite ride is our 2019 ride, Infinity Racers, which is the world's longest, tallest head-first mat racers. And it's Infinity Racers. It's very dark in there, but there's translucent lights that come through, so it kind of looks like you're flying through outer space. It's really awesome. And in New Braunfels, my kids are a huge fan of the Lagoon River. So if you've seen pictures of Schlitterbahn or you Google Schlitterbahn, one of the first pictures that you'll come across is our big castle, which is incredibly iconic. That is like the picture to get if you come to Schlitterbahn New Braunfels. And from there flows with Comal River water, like a little tube chute kind of winding down the hill, and it ends up in the lagoon. And that whole area is being completely renovated this offseason too, by the way. And it is just such a fun, iconic ride that my kids love. So, it depends if I'm by myself or with my kids. Obviously, a lot depends on whether or not my kids are with me, but the attractions do too.
So I've got to ask. I know. I mean, I've talked to other, Cedar Fair PR marketing folks who have children. Like, do your kids are like, my dad's the water park guy and he can open Schlitterbahn for me and like all this stuff? Do they like brag to their friends that that you're the water park guy?
Yeah. So I have a first grader, and then a preschooler, and then a little baby. She doesn't brag about anything, but my first grader, he tells his teachers like that I will get them tickets to the park. So every year for teacher appreciation, like we're kind of stuck into that now,
Yeah.
Which is awesome. I mean, teachers deserve everything, but it's funny, and we sometimes have kind of a friends and family operating days before the park opens, just to get kind of our staff acclimated to what they're going to be doing. And sometimes I'll invite his class to come out and his little friends, and they just have a blast. So it's all about, my dad works at Schlitterbahn, and every time I come to work, they ask to come to work with me. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to go I'm not going in the river. I'm going to my office, and it's going to be boring for you, and they're like, no, but I want to go there instead of school. I'm like, no. It's hard for them to say. It's hard for them to realize the difference between working in an office and making TikToks all day versus playing in the park, both of which are very fun.
Absolutely, I love it. Well, I'm sorry that we couldn't bring your son on the podcast today. He's at school tough break, but I think
man.
he'll have to get over it.
He will.
I'm not that important. I'm not as cool as a water slide.
No, but I think that he would have so much to talk about Schlitterbahn. I worked from home for a year and a half, so he hears me on calls and on interviews and stuff. So he knows like all the Schlitterbahn lingo and what to say when people ask this or that. And he's just like a little mini PR dude. So, we'll see what he becomes when he grows up.
So I can talk to him about what's coming in 2023 and 2024, and he's got a little bit less of a filter than you do. Listen,
I'm enough of a PR guy that I know what to say in front of my children and what not to say in front of my children.
I love it. That's awesome. Yeah, we had my co-writer Nick. He and his family went up to Legoland in New York, and we interviewed his kids on the podcast fairly recently. And interviewing a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old on a podcast, it was an adventure. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah, I'm sure it was really easy to keep their attention, huh?
Oh yeah, 100%. It's the stuff I was seeing on the Zoom call was it was interesting to say the least.
We'll wait till a little bit longer before I allow my kids on the podcast, but man, I have some wild children that are very funny in their own rights, and some of them are actually on our TikTok channel, so you can see how crazy they are. Yeah.
I love it. Let's go back to your favorites. If you get a meal at Galveston, if it's the new taco truck or if it's something that exists in the park, I know, and you're giving the little chin rubbing confusion. Again, this is an audio podcast, so he's thinking on it. But you get one meal at Schlitterbahn Galveston. What are you eating?
One meal at Schlitterbahn Galveston, man. I think I am gonna go for our new taco truck recipe. So they are 3 different styles of meats. And my favorite, so we've gotten to try a little bit of this stuff, before, but it actually makes its debut. So I'm speaking from experience. But the carne asada tacos it's like a sriracha sour cream aioli that they put on top of cilantro and onions, just very street taco. The street corn, I think that's going to get me in trouble this season. Yeah.
That's awesome. And then same thing at New Braunfels. Are you going something German inspired or something more traditionally Texas, like brisket barbecue, or, are you eating an entire season worth of brisket stuffed turkey legs?
Man, the stuffed turkey leg is a lot. It's a lot. So I think my favorite meal is the brisket plate. Just that slow smoked, tender, juicy brisket, slow smoked for 14 hours with, there's sausage and pickles and onions and just the traditional Texas barbecue plate. And it's so potato salad, man. It's so good. It is so good. And I know that there's, with the new chefs coming in, there's going to be a focus on some healthier options, So I'm excited to try those out too. I know sometimes when I'm out in the water park and it's super hot and I'm sweaty from just running around all day, the last thing I want is like a hot, heavy, giant meal. But like a cool sandwich or a salad or a wrap or something sounds phenomenal. So those are my favorite meals as of right now, but man, it very well could change.
Okay. I do want to just point out that I asked a Texan his 2 favorite meals into the parks, and he went with tacos and brisket. And this might be the most Texas answer I've ever heard on a podcast.
Yeehaw, Andrew. Yeehaw, baby.
I love it. That's awesome. And then, obviously, I'm not trying to pry with this question. Yes. If you could add any attraction from any other water park, I know you've got a pretty good grasp on other water parks around the country and around the world. If you could bring a water park attraction from another park to a Schlitterbahn park, what would that be? I know this is a question I've probably caught you off guard a little bit here.
A little bit, yeah. So I would like to bring in an attraction that a lot of people can go on at a while, or can go on at the same time. Mm-hmm. Something like a Riptide Raceway at World or Oceans of Fun, in Missouri. I think that So one thing that we've noticed is people are ready to get back to fun, and they are going to do that. So what I would like, I mean, of course, I would like the biggest, tallest, coolest water coaster, but I think what makes the most sense for Schlitterbahn is something that we can get a lot of people on and a lot of people off, like our rivers, you know. And I think a ride like that would be really cool at both of our parks, and they look good. You know,
Yes.
like it's fun to see that when you're pulling up to the park, especially. I mean, Schlitterbahn is a place. So a little bit of insight: people come with a group of about 5 or 6 at least. That's our average group size that people come with. So people are coming with their families, sometimes a multi-generational family, and I think that's a fun attraction that grandma can ride with her kids and her grandkids, and everybody can race and have stories to tell at the end of the day.
Maybe your grandmother, my grandmother, not so much, but another story, another day. Yeah, you mentioned the multi-lane mat racing slide, and obviously my home park of Carowinds, they just opened Boogie Board Racer. It is visually stunning. I completely get what you're saying from a standpoint there. But before we wrap this podcast up, I want your best elevator pitch on why people should visit Schlitterbahn on their next Texas trip. I know New Braunfels is kind of in the greater San Antonio metro area. Galveston is obviously its own tourist destination. But why should people add a trip to Schlitterbahn to their Texas itinerary?
If you are coming to Texas, Schlitterbahn is a Texas staple. Like I mentioned earlier, summer isn't summer without a visit to Schlitterbahn. Texans know that. But if you are coming to Texas to experience Texas, maybe something like briskets and tacos. I don't know why I'm saying those. But man, add Schlitterbahn to your to-do list. There is nothing quite like Schlitterbahn, New Braunfels, that just built alongside the Comal riverbanks. And Schlitterbahn Galveston, it's on a beautiful island destination. 2 completely different experiences with the same goal of making people happy. It's the hottest, coolest time in Texas, and really, Andrew, this is a tough question because it's hard to describe how special these parks are with words. So it makes my job as the communications person very difficult. It's almost something that you just have to experience yourself. So come and experience it yourself.
I'm on it. We were scheduled to go to Texas. It would have been May of 2020, and we all know how that worked out. So I've got to throw a trip to Texas into the rotation so I can come visit Schlitterbahn, come hang out with you, enjoy some of that brisket, enjoy some of that taco, and go home with 2 or 3 turkey legs in my suitcase.
That's right. And I mean, nobody would bat an eye, you know? So, I mean, maybe when you land in Charlotte, they'd be like, what are you doing, dude? But feel free to come out whenever. I'd love to host you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Aaron. And where can people find Schlitterbahn on the greater worldwide interwebs?
Yeah, our website is schlitterbahn.com. We also have a presence on Facebook, Schlitterbahn Galveston and Schlitterbahn New Braunfels, Twitter, TikTok, and then Instagram at Bon New Braunfels and at Bon Galveston. So check us out, see everything that's happening. A lot of what we're doing, a lot of our new announcements are going to come out on social first. So
perfect. The new announcements that we're not allowed to talk about on this podcast, but as soon as I hang up this call, you're going to tell me all about it. Maybe not. Anyway,
you know what? We'll schedule a call a year from now. And
I'm in it.
Talk about it.
We will have your back. You're welcome on anytime, Aaron. Thank you so much for your time. That's going to do it for this week's episode of the Coaster 101 podcast. After you visit Schlitterbahn.com, make sure you check us out at Coaster101.com. We're also on all of the social medias, including TikTok. We're at Coaster101, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those good places. If you're listening to this podcast, make sure you're doing all of the other podcast buzzverbs, liking, rating, reviewing, subscribing, telling your friends, going on iTunes, leaving 5-star reviews. We love those. So make sure you're doing that. Also, if you're unaware, we are selling our 2022 Coaster 101 calendar to benefit Give Kids the World. There's 13 roller coasters from across the United States, from different parks. So be sure to check that out at Coaster101.com. Thanks, as always, to Justin Mabry of JM Music Design for our theme music, and we will talk to you all again soon. See ya.
Bye, everybody.